So we are now going to start with configuration toolkit. The first of it is form builder. As I mentioned, Masterworks Form Builder is a powerful tool. It helps you create custom forms, XML forms. This tool provides you XML templates, which helps you drag and drop easily consumable controls into your form and build it. Once you have built it, you will be able to publish it and locate it, position it in any module that we have in Masterworks. You also have the ability to assign business process workflows to the custom forms that you have created. So that helps you automate any business process that you want to assign to your own custom form. So the utility works is first, it helps you create it. And if you want to make any edits to it, you can do edits to your form and publish the form. Only the published forms will be visible for any functional user to start adding content or adding records in that form. Right? Once you have published it, you should be able to perform any functional aspect in it. And if you have created your own custom form, you also have the ability to delete those as well. So this is just a business case. I would anyways be explaining it in the demo, but as an example, if imagine in an organization, if they are using Masterworks for their project management and they want to capture all contract related items in a separate form, the form data can capture contractor name, the container or an item, list of prerequisite for that contract, description of that, the item start and end date, all these things if one would want to capture. They would want to capture it in a way that they have different types of controls they would want to associate to each of this information. For example, contractor name should be able to be populated from the library field, a library form called vendors. So there needs to be a drop down list. So users should be able to add a drop down list in their form, and that drop down list should dynamically populate data from any of the existing library catalog. Container item, again, it should come from the standard items list. So there needs to be a picker for them or a drop down list again there. And if it is a list of prerequisite or description, you can simply have a single line text or a multi-line text. You can add those controls as well. For dates, you can add date controls in there. So our form builder tool gives you the ability to add different types of these controls that typically one would see in any Masterworks form. So you have the ability to create those as well. And each of those controls will have a database entry created in the database. There will be a table created as and when you publish your form. So like when you do that, every time a functional user opens the form and adds a new record, the database will get activated. And if any read data needs to be pulled in, that will be populated from the database. If any write data needs to be written back to the database, that can also be possible like in any other form. So that form builder gives us the flexibility to do all that. And like I mentioned, this is the typical life cycle. You would create a form, edit the form definition, specify where you want to host this form, and you would be entering all the details. And if you want to associate a workflow, you will be able to associate a workflow as well to your form. After that, you should be able to publish your form. And once you've published it in runtime, when I say runtime, you are now not in the admin section, you are either in the functional modules or in the library for that matter. You should be able to create records in those respective form that you have created. And where would you access this form builder? In the admin module, you have a folder called configuration toolkit. When you expand that, you have two forms. One is workflow management, another one is form builder. When you click form builder, you land on the forms list page. Here, if you have already created or any admin has already created custom forms in the past, they will see that in the list page, and you have the ability to click new and create your own custom form. This is visible only to administrator, like I mentioned. And once you click new, you will be landed on, there are two tabs that you will be seeing. First is general and then one is design. In the general tab, the form ID will be automatically created. It's a 7-digit alphanumeric number. So that is the unique ID that is reflecting this form, that is registering this form to the database. Header is the form name that you would be entering. So that is how it will be reflected on the navigation tree. Parent module, if you want to place this form in a library module or project module or planning module, any module, you can pick that. And if you want to create a subfolder in it, or you have a folder structure already there and you want to just put this form there, you can enter that folder structure. If that folder structure doesn't exist already, whatever you type, that folder will get created automatically, and this form will be placed inside that folder structure. So that's where it is. Once you have entered it, you click the design tab. Once you click the design tab, that's where you land on the design page of the form builder. You have various controls here. And on the left side, you have different controls grouped under different categories, group layout, simple input controls, child data containers. So you have different groupings of it. And the key here is we have grouped it based on which mode that you are viewing. By default, it would load on the simple mode. The reason why we have kept it as simple mode and advanced mode is that simple mode will enable any user to just get started with creating a simple custom form and capture basic data with basic controls added in there and publish it. If somebody wants to have advanced features enabled in them, like a picker or a dynamic grid or some kind of a formula added, if they want to do all that, you have the advanced mode enabled so that anybody wants to create a simple form, they don't get cluttered with so much of options for them to get confused with. So that's why we have the simple mode and advanced mode. And once you enable that, accordingly, the tabs and the controls within the tabs will get populated. And on the center pane is where you would actually build your form by dragging the controls onto the center pane and start building your form. On the right side, you have attributes and hierarchy. Hierarchy is nothing but the hierarchy of fields that you have added. And that also helps you select and view what fields that you want to see on the list page of your form. I'll come to that later, but attributes is what you really need to focus on. Every element that you see here will have its own set of attributes. The form in itself will have its own set of attributes. Any control that you add will have its own set of attributes. Any container that you add will have its own set of attributes. So the attributes determine what type of options that you want to enable for a control. You want to keep it as read-only. You want to make it mandatory. You want to have certain data sources pulled in for a drop-down list. All that is managed in the attributes. I'll get to that when I do the demo of it. So like I mentioned, these are all the different controls, and that's the switch for you to switch between simple mode and advanced mode. And you can open each of those collapsible sections, and you can drag the required section into the build pane, that is the center pane, and you can start building it. So as you can see, as and when you drag it on the right side, you have your attributes that get dynamically changed based on what control that you clicked. What if you are at the form level or a section level or a control level, accordingly, the attributes keep changing. Like I mentioned, these are all the advanced controls. When you click to the advanced, you have the ability to view those as well. And you have ability to pull pickers. Pickers are something that you would have gotten familiar with. As you can see on the right side, it's blurred right now, but when you see on the right side against name, you see the text box and you have the three dot picker here. So when you click it, another pop-up comes up which dynamically populates data from any of the data source. You will be able to select those fields and that gets populated in the text box. That's the picker. Typically, if you are creating a simple form, you would not get into a picker. But if you want to create a picker and then dynamically select data from different forms, you should be able to use a picker. Right? And these are all the attributes, like I mentioned, a form has its own set of attributes. Any specific control that you have that has its own set of attributes. I will not get over each of these fields, but I will share this PPT with you. You should be able to read through this, each and every field and attribute. It gives you the description. For example, if you want attachment grid to be enabled for your form, you can set that field to be true. If you want new, edit, delete, all these buttons to be visible on the list page, you can enable those respective attributes in there. And if you want to make this
So Lionel,
form, yes,
Lionel, we haven't talked about privileges yet, but go back one slide.
One more.
Yeah, no, actually, no, go forward again. So this where we have what you're displaying, whether you're allowing or displaying. How do you specify this by roles? So I want project managers to do one thing and I want accountants to do something different on a form.
Yes, I'll get to that. I'll get to that.
Okay.
So what you
right,
do is
thanks.
once you have built your form, you will see the form in a form called permissions. That is also an administrator activity. So in the permissions form, you will have the ability to pick which set of roles will have what type of permissions to the form that you have just created.
Okay.
Certain roles might have edit permission. Certain roles might have only view permission. So you can enable all those permissions in that form. That is also a part of the form builder activity. I'll get to that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So these are all the different attributes at a form level, and you have certain attributes at the control level as well. So when I say control, what I mean is text field is a control, a drop-down list is a control. So at each of those specific controls also, you have your own attributes. So you can explore all these things in the PPT once I share it with you. Once you have built your form, you need to publish your form for it to be visible on the module that you have aligned it with. Now let me get into the system and I'll do a demonstration of it so that you will be able to witness what I have just explained so far. So as you can see, I am on the administration module, and this is the configuration toolkit that I talked about. When you expand that, you have the two forms. So because form builder and workflow builder are two important forms, we have given the hyperlink for them in the administration working pane as well. You can navigate to the form builder or to the workflow builder from both locations. So if you are clicking form builder here, it will take you to the forms list page. If you are in the administration and you want to navigate through the navigation pane, you can click form builder and that will take you to the same place. So this is the forms list page. I have already created a form. This is the form that I have built for my team members. If I want to capture a set of team members that I want to create for my own project, so I can create a form, capture different team member details within the form, and those will be different line item records in my list page. So just to give you a gist of it, this is the form that I created. So in this form, what I have captured is a record ID that will get automatically generated as and when every record gets added. Who has created this record? This again is automatically populated. When was it created? Automatically populated. An employee name that I want to enter because this is the team member that I am adding for my project. This is a mandatory field. Contact number rather. And this is an integer. You cannot enter any other text field. And is this employee active? I want to mention that as well. And what type of an employee is this? And if it is a contractor, I would want to capture the vendor name as well. If it is anything else, this field itself will not be visible. And I would also want to enter my email ID. So capture the employee's email ID. In addition to it, I want to capture the employee's work experience. This is a dynamic grid. So when I publish it, you will see that I can dynamically capture the different companies that this employee has worked in. In each company, what is the designation that this employee has and how many years that they have spent in there. So this table will get dynamically added with multiple rows. So I have added that control as well. I just showed a picker here just for reference for you. So this picker will pick data from a list of resources that are already available in library. So these are all the details that I have captured here. I will just show you how this looks in the actual functional form. Then I will show you how to build this data from beginning. Right, so this is the form that I had created and I had enabled it for my own project. And in that project, I have enabled it and I have captured some records as well. So when I click new, so there is a general details section that got created and I have my employee name. I need to enter this. If I don't enter it and save it, it will ask me because it's a mandatory field. So this is how. So for example, this is consultant. If I say contractor, the vendor name got populated. If I pick anything else, the vendor name is not populated. So it is visible if kind of a control that I've kept. So this is the work experience grid, the dynamic grid that got added. So if I click add, it will give me to the option to add data. As and when I add data, it will get populated in here. Resource name picker. So when I click there, this is the picker. I can pick any data that gets populated with the resource name here. Attachment grid also is added here. And as you can see, I have enabled a workflow for this. I will show you how to create a custom workflow and associate it to my custom form. So these are all things that I have done. I will explain another. I will create one more form and I'll go through this so you can witness all this. All right. So now I am back in the work form builder form itself. I click new. I'll collapse this. So as I mentioned, when I click new, there are two tabs, general tab, where I have the form ID. I can enter the name of my form. So this I will say Lionel project team, right? This is the name of my form, which will appear on the navigation tree. And parent module, you have all the modules opened up. You can create a form in library, you can create anywhere, but this time I'm going to create it inside a project, right? And I'm just going to keep it at the first level. I don't want to put it inside any folder. So I've just specified a name for my form and the module in which I want to place this form. And now I'm going to design tab. So when I go to design tab, I have the sections collapsed already. I can click there. You will see the options inside that. These are all simple input controls. And you have your child data containers, which helps you create tables within your form, right? And you can see that it is by default, it is in simple mode. When I click, now it has switched to advanced mode. So you can see that in the group layout itself, you have a lot more options visible. You have simple input controls and you see one more section called advanced controls. You have furthermore options in there because we are in the advanced mode. And you can see that there is a third tab that got added, which is called XML editor. Because people who have the advanced capability, who can understand XML code, they can go to the XML editor and make changes in here as well. But typically, we don't expect the functional users or the admins to do that. We provide all the capability for them to build it right here. So right now it is an advanced mode. So if I click anywhere inside this is the form. By default, this is the form. So if I click anywhere here, I get the attributes specific to the form, right? So the name of the attribute, this was the name of the database name of the form. And you can see that the header of the form, which is the name of the form, it got automatically pulled in here. The parent module is pulled in here. So if you want attachment grid to be available for your form, I can set it to true. So you can hover over the options. It says allow attachments. So I'm setting it to true. And you can see allow still export. So you can see that any list page form, if you want to export your data into an Excel template and import it back, you have ability to do so. So here is where you will be able to pick that option. So Excel export, I have kept it as true. And in addition to it, every XML form that you create in Masterworks, you have the list page report and details report created by default. So for your form, if you want to enable that, you can keep it. If you don't want any report generation capability in your form, you can set it to false. By default, details report and list page report are set to true. All right. And if I go to advanced attributes, there are a set of attributes that I would like you to be aware of. So there are, I mean, these are all different attributes, table name and all that. The ones that I would like you to show, keep in mind is active. What it does is, if I set it to false, you will have created your form, but it will not be visible on the nav tree for people to perform any action on. So by default, it is true. And is searchable means I told you about the capability called enterprise search in the introduction course. So if you want this form and the fields in the form to be available for anybody to search for data within this form, you can set it to true. So that means in the enterprise search, this form will be available for them to pick and search for data within the form. And show in my reports. So my reports is also something that I taught on, in one of the previous sessions. So my reports is the ad hoc reports that I talked to you about, right? Custom reports. So if you want to, create reports out of this form data as well, you can set it to true. I'll just leave it as is. And you have display, new, edit, view, delete. So these are all the different options that you would see in any list page. So this is the list page. You have new, edit, view, and delete. Certain forms, if the customer does not want people to delete, they would not want to show the delete option at all. So you can just set that to false. Otherwise, by default, it's all true. And allow Excel import and export. I have just kept it as false. And if you want to enable the mail merge features, like mail merge we talked about last week, may merge and attach merge an email. If you want these options to be enabled, you can keep it as true. Otherwise, you can set it to false. And single instance is something that you would usually use when you are creating a record for only one instance. So most of our administration forms are all single instance forms. They are all settings forms. So you enter data once and just save it, and that's all. If you make changes to it, it overrides the previous record. So those are single instance forms. Multi-instance forms are all our list pages. You click new, you create multiple instances of that form. So that's why it is called as multi-instance form. By default, because you are creating form where you create multiple records in there, you keep it as multiple instance. So single instance is set to false. So these are all some of the common attributes that I would like you to keep in mind at a form level. All right. So now I have set all these things. Now at a form level, I have set my attributes. Now, if I want to start building my form, how would I build it? So these are all different options that you have at your disposal for you to just drag it and start building. Now we are at the advanced mode. So you see these different column layouts, 2-column layout, 3-column layout and all. 2-column layout, it just gives you the option to just, if you just drag it here, it gets placed in the builder. So as you can see, there are 2 columns of record controls that you can place. By default, when you pull it in, you have the section name and you have 2 normal, simple single line text entry fields get added. So now if you click the section, you have the attribute specific to the section listed. If you click any control here, you have attributes specific to the control listed here. This is what I meant when I said the attributes are dynamically changing based on where you have clicked. If you click outside in the form, these are all the form specific attributes. So now I go to the section. You have the ability to just double click it and change the section name. So I'm just saying general details, right? And I enter it. The moment I enter it, my section name got saved and it's reflecting in the caption as well. So caption is what you see on the screen. Name is what it gets saved in the database. So for me to easily refer to it, I'm just going to enter the same, but the key here is you don't enter any space here. So you enter all the details in one word without any space so that the database doesn't get confused. At the same time, you are able to refer to it because these are all the names that will be visible on your list page, on your hierarchy. So if you don't know what it is, it will be difficult for you to enable or disable what you want to view. Right, so I have just entered a name for my section and I also entered a name for the database reference to that section. So I'll just leave it at this. And next thing what I'm going to do is, so you have this. Next thing what I'm going to do is, as I mentioned, I would want an auto incremental record ID for my form. So you can see that in simple input controls, you have this field option called control called auto generated. I just drag it and place it right here. So when I placed it, this is an auto increment control that we have added. I'll just change this. I'll just say record ID, right? And similarly, I'll just change the name of the control so I'm able to refer to it properly. So I have just entered the record name of this. So by default, every time you create a record, the record ID will get incremented by 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4. If you want to customize it, we have the ability to do so. So you can see that there is a numbering logic here, right? When you click that numbering logic, it opens up and it gives you how many digits you want it. Right now, it doesn't show anything. It's just picking the default value. If you want to give any digits, you can say 3 digits. And you can see the preview says instead of 1, it will say 001, right? And if you want the interval to be incremented by 5 or incremented by 2, you can keep it that way. I'm just going to leave it at 1. And you have the ability to add prefix or suffix based on how you want to. This is the employee detail that I'm capturing. So I would really want a fixed prefix right at the beginning, right? So I'm just saying EMP. And the separator, I would like to have it as hyphen. And I would add another one, which is auto-generated 1. So this is 1 and the separator is like this. So based on the order in which I'm adding it, the reference, the record ID gets added accordingly. So now it's going to say EMP-001. So you can play around with this, but I'm just going to give you at a high level and I click OK. So this is the numbering logic that we have saved for this particular record ID. Right. The other one that I showed you was how to add a default created by. Right. So I just want to change this into a read-only field, and I want this record to be populated by the username, the name in which I have added. I have logged in. I want the full username to be automatically populated as created by. So I'll just change this saying created by, right? And similarly, I'll change the name of this to created by, and I would want this to be a read-only file, right? I would want this to be a read-only file, and I want the value of this to be picking from an existing data. So where would you do that? So what I did is I changed the name of the control and I made it to be a read-only file. I don't want anybody to edit that data. So I made it a read-only file. And this data should be automatically populated. That means it has to pick data from dynamically from an existing record. So how would that happen? This is the value. So in value, I click the picker. So it gives you the select resolver. So these are all the different options that are available for you. So I want the current user's full name. That is the name that I want to pick and click OK. So what had just happened is created by will automatically generate it and you cannot edit it and it picks the current user's full name. All right. So this is one thing I have added. And the other thing I would want to add is created on, right? So for that, I would like to pull a date record. So I pull a date control and I'll drag it here. So this one, I would want to keep it as created on, right? So you can pull it like this, right? So you can just put it like this and change this to created on, and you can keep this as read only. So you can do it like this, or like I showed you the other like last time, you can just go to the value and you can pick the date here as well. So you have a date option here. So you can pick that date option, current date. So you can pick it like that also. But I made it simpler by pulling a date control and I just changed it there. So these are two things that I have added. One last thing I would show you before I publish and show you how the form will be reflected is I would want to capture the employee name, right? So I have put the employee name here. I'll put the name for my reference. And one more thing I want to do is I want this to be a mandatory field, right? So how would I mark a field as a mandatory field? So how would I do that? I would click that particular record, right? And I would go to the validation. So validation is something that comes as advanced attribute. So here I just enter required. Click OK. The moment I do that, you will see the star mark here. So I'll repeat that process so you can follow up. So to mark any field as mandatory, you click the field, you go to the attributes and expand the advanced attributes. And when you go scroll down, you'll see a field attribute called validations. You can just type required here. And once you type and required and press enter, you'll see the star mark appearing on the field name. So now we have just captured these three data. Let me go ahead and publish this record. So now I have created a form with some basic data in there and I have published it. So I'm seeing that in the forms list page, I see a new form created, which is saying Lionel project team, and it is in a published format and the parent module is project. Now I go to the functional module. So this is the project that I want that form to be enabled. So how it works is if for any existing projects, you have to go and enable that particular form. For any new project that gets created, these forms will automatically start appearing in the navigation tree. So if I want to enable it for my existing project, I go to project details. I edit the record. So I scroll down and I see a section which is collapsed called modules. I expand that. And as I keep scrolling down, the new form that I had associated to the project module is listed here. All I have to do is select this checkbox and save the record. So once I have done that, I would start seeing that form in the list page. So I can see the form, which is Lionel project team that I had just created, appearing here. So in here, what you see is the list page with the record ID created on employee name, and I click new. See, the created by is automatically populated, created on is populated, All I see here is employee name. If I click save, it will say that I cannot save it. I have to enter a name, right? So once I enter a name and save the record, it will get saved. At this point, I don't want to create any record. I would want to fill this form fully and then start adding records. So this is how it is. I had enabled the attachment grid to be visible, so that is visible here. Now I'll explain the things that I had enabled at the form level that will be appearing on the list page. So I had enabled mail merge, so those are appearing here. I had kept all the four options visible, as in I kept it as true, so all of them are visible here. I had kept the details report and list page report available here, that is visible. And I had applied for only Excel export. I did not enable Excel import. So I can only export this data into an Excel sheet. That is visible here. Other options are by default in any XML form, you will see. So now let me go back to my form. I'll add more controls to it. I am going to go back. I went back to the forms list page. I'm editing this record. So now instead of employee
question,
name.
Lionel.
Yes, Dan.
If you are doing this in any other module, like the library or something else, how do you do the enabling of the form? Because the library tree is already, I mean, it has to be updated, or does it automatically appear a new form that you've published?
Yeah, so any other form, for example, library, when you are associating it to library, automatically that form will appear there.
Okay, thank you.
Only for project and contracts, you need to manually enable them.
Okay, thank you.
For your information, if you add it to library, it will not be something that you can put permissions to, because the library, all forms in the library basically have the same permissions. And you cannot specify it out, so you won't find it on the permissions page.
Yeah, because library on its whole, administrators have access to it. Or if you want to associate library permission to any other role, you will be able to do that. However, how Masterworks is designed is all the forms, all the catalogs in library, you will be able to enable it for create and edit permission to any specific role. You may not be able to select specific forms in the library and assign it to certain roles. That's what the limitation that we have. And there is a reason why we have kept it that way, because library forms typically we don't enable it for every functional user. By default, administrators have access to it. And if you want any edit level permission to be given to any specific role that you have created for your implementation, you can do so. So I will show you how that happens. For example, if I'm adding a drop down, right? I'm adding a drop down, which is actually going to tell me what type of an employee am I adding, right? Employee type. So I've just added an employee type. So this drop down, you have two ways to populate the drop down list. So you can add, hard code the options, right? You can hard code the options to be appearing on the drop down list, or you can dynamically populate the drop down list values. So where would you do all that is you have a field or attribute called a data source for a drop down list. So you click that data source. So you have two sections. The top section is where you would be able to add hard coded values. So if you want to make this as contractor and this as contract value, so display is the name that appears on the screen and value is the one that gets added in the database. So if you want to make those changes, add static changes or hard coded values rather, you can do it here, or you can select which module that you want the data to be populated from. So for example, I'm picking library as the module, and in library, I want to pick a form which is called as work type, right? Work type is the form, and what I wanted to display is the work type. And these are filters if you want to have any filters to it, and if you want to have sorted and all that on the list page rather, right? And the value that you want to view from the database is the work type. The moment I do that, I have these options. So now I click OK. So what just happened is, in addition to the hard coded value, you are also seeing the work type from the library coming here, commercial building construction. So I mean, I might have picked a wrong library form. So I can go ahead and change that. So I go back to the data source. Instead of work type, let it load. Instead of work type, there are other options as well. Resource type rather. Resource type displayed, and the value also resource type. So you can change it that way, and you can ignore the static fields. You can delete those and click OK. So what has happened is you will only see the dynamically populated library data listed here. So as and when an administrator adds data in the library catalog, which is resource type catalog, if there are more data added, all those will be populated in the drop-down list. All right. So this is how you populate a drop-down list or any list record for that matter using the data source. Dynamically, you can pull data from any module within Masterworks. Okay. So the other option that I showed you was visible if, right? So if the employee type is contractor, you would want to pick the vendor name, which is again coming from library. If you want to do that, I'm going to add one more drop-down list here. And this is vendor name. Right, so this data source I want to pull again from library, and the form should be vendors, and name of it is what I want to show, and name of the vendor, right? So this vendor option now will show all the vendors that are coming from library. Let me go ahead and remove the static data that we have added. All right. So now I want to put it in a way that it is visible only if the employee type is contractor. So how would I do that? I click this control and I go to, I'll switch to advanced. I go to advanced attributes, and in there is a field called visible if, right? So I will enable this and say that, one minute.
Which attribute are you editing?
Yeah, let me repeat that. So this is the vendor name field, right? So I want this field itself to appear only if the employee type is contractor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to that particular field and I go to advanced attributes. I scroll down and this is visible if. This is the attribute, visible if. I click the picker, the editor comes up here. So in here, I want to change this visible if. So if this value employee type is equal to contractor, right? This is all I invented. So employee type is the value database value of this particular field. That's the value symbol, dollar symbol is equal to contractor. Okay, so now I have just added a visible if control here. So when I publish this and show you, only when I pick contractor, this field itself should come, right? So let's see if that has worked properly. Now I have added these details. Let me go ahead and publish this. One last thing I would show you is the picker, how the picker works. Diane, you had asked for it. I'll explain that, how that works, and then we will move on to workflow builder. Okay, so I have published this form. Now let me go back to my regular form, functional form. So when I click new, so right now the vendor name itself is not coming. If I go to contractor, then the vendor name comes. Because it is a contractor, I need to associate the vendor name as well. Then I can pick whichever I want to. So this is how you can enable certain fields to be appearing only based on the options that you have picked on some other field. So this is one option. The last thing that I would like to show you is the picker. So let me go ahead and edit my own form. And I switch to advanced. right? So picker, first thing is I want to add a picker, right? So picker, where would you see is in the child data container section, you see an option called picker. So I drag this and I drop it in the form, right? You are not dropping it into a section or into any control, you are dropping it into the form, which is outside. So once you have dropped it, the data source picker automatically comes up. So this picker, I want to pick data from the resource directory, enterprise resource directory. So for Diane, you wanted the name of the employee to be picked from an existing library record and not a random name. So I'm going to pick the library and the form should be enterprise resource directory. And the display column should be the name, right? And the key column should be the name again. And what are the columns that I want to display in the picker itself is ID, name, resource type, and working hours. And if I want that to be sorted, I mean, when the picker comes up, if I want to sort it and then pick it, I can add that as well. I'm just selecting the same set of fields. So far what I have done is I just dragged the picker into the form layout. Automatically the data source picker comes up. I picked the module, I picked the appropriate form, and what is it that I want to display on the picker? Name, and the key column is again name. And in the add columns to display, what I have showed is the ID, which is the unique ID of the record, name, resource type, and working hours. These are all the things that I wanted to be shown in the picker when the pop-up comes up. And accordingly, based on the data that I see, I can pick anyone, and that only the name will be appearing on the text field, right? So this is the one. And if I want to sort it, I have that ability as well, and I click OK. So once you click OK, the picker gets generated. So this is the first step of adding a picker. OK, so I just pulled in the picker and I entered all these details. Now let me explain. Yeah, any questions so far?
No.
All right. So now I have added a picker. The second step is to add a set. So that you would see in the advanced controls. So set what it does is it adds a text box, and because it's a set control, as the name suggests, it can have a set of two controls. One is the text box and another one is the picker trigger. The trigger is nothing but the three dot that you click that triggers the pop-up that comes up, and then you select that option, and that option, whatever you wanted to display, that will be displayed in the text box. So that's what I'm going to add. So in the advanced controls, this is the set that I'm dragging and dropping it here. So for a set to be dropped, you need a layout. So I'm just adding a section without a header right below the picker. So I have a section added. In that section, I'm adding the set here. So now I have added a set in this here. So for this set, you have a name that you would want to keep for the set. So the name I would want to keep is resource name. This is the name of the set. And in the text box, I would not want to have a name in there. So I will just remove the caption of it. OK, so I have removed the caption of the text box. So that is gone. And I want the title of the set to be on the left of the control. So set titles to left, I'm selecting that to true. OK, so now we have a set which has a name called resource name, and the text box, I have just left the text box as is. I did not name the text box, so that text box name is not appearing. However, the set name is appearing, so it is on the left side. I've set that control as well. So this text box should have a value. That value should be coming from the picker, right? So I'm clicking the text box control and I am adding the value here. So this is the value attribute. So I click the value and I select the resolver. I scroll down. The resolver that I want to pick is picker. When I picked that, whatever picker that we had just added, the name of the picker will appear. You pick that. And in that picker, we had added four fields. And the column that I want to be visible in that text box is name. So I've selected the name. What I did is I clicked the value of the picker, the value of the text box. It opened up the value editor. I picked the picker as the resolver. Based on that, the picker name I picked, and based on the picker that I selected, the columns in the picker is coming for me to pick. So I've done all this and I clicked OK. All right. So now I have added a set and I selected a value for the text box as well. The third thing I want to do is I want to add a picker trigger, right? The picker trigger is the three dot text box. I just drag it here and I put it in the control. So again, the picker trigger, I don't want any name for it, right? And if I scroll down, the picker name of this trigger should be the picker that we just created. I select the picker and the unique column ID we need to select. That is why I selected ID as well as one of the picker fields. So I can pick the ID here. I click OK. So now we have a trigger that we have selected for that. So that is the picker name, right? And I want the three dot to be the visible text on the picker. So I've entered that as well. So now we have the picker here, the trigger here with the three dots added. So all I am doing now is to just drag this and place it inside the set. So I just dragged that picker trigger that I had added and I placed it inside the set. When I did that, it automatically got assigned next to the text box, right? And this text box, whatever gets added, I don't want anybody to change the value of that. So I'm making this as a read-only option. Right. So basically what I did, first step for adding a picker is to pull a picker and select the modules, select the values and all that, and you created a picker here. The second step you did is you you just pulled a section without a header so that you can place the set inside that section. You pulled the set here and you assigned a name for the set and you removed the name for the text box itself. And you assigned a value for the text box. The value is the name of the, the employee or the resource, which is coming from the picker itself. And you assigned that and you made that as a read only. Next, what you did, you actually pulled a picker trigger and pulled it right below the set and you removed the name of the picker trigger. And the trigger, you picked the name of the picker, which is going to be popped up when you click the trigger. So you selected that as well. And what you did is you just dragged it and placed it inside the set. The moment you did that, it got automatically added next to the text box. And now you have your picker trigger ready. I'm just going to publish this record. If I have followed all the steps, the picker should work like charm. I have published this. I go back to the list page. I refresh this page. I click new. So we have a resource name and a trigger. I click the trigger, the trigger pops up and here I had picked ID, which is a unique ID, the name of the resource, the type of the resource and working hours. All that are there. If I click Allison Jones and I select, the name of the resource got saved here. And because I had made it as read only, I don't have the option to change it. Like this, you can have n number of pickers added in your form so that you don't have to manually enter anything and it might result in introducing any errors or typos. So if you want to avoid that, you can add pickers, as many pickers as you want in your form, and you can follow this control so that you can make life easier for the end users when they are capturing data in that form that you have added. Any queries here?
Is it very different to do a multiple picker? In other words, being able
Not
to
at all.
select
It's the
2 or 3
same.
or 4 options?
So you can perform the same option, you can repeat the same for every picker that you add, and all that will get added in your form that you have. And once you have done that, you can pull that control set in wherever you want to. That set will get placed there. And if you have 3 pickers one after another, you can pull the set in there, and accordingly you can place it whichever section that you want. So that is form builder. So we have created our custom form. We published it. We showed you how to create certain controls, add certain controls inside your form. And we also showed you how to functionally use it in any specific module that you have placed it in. The next thing that I would do is I would go ahead and show you how to assign permissions to security roles that we have for the form that we have just created. All right. So that is also part of our administration module, but I would explain that in the next session. But only to tell you where to assign permissions to the custom form. In the user management, again, it is available in the administration module. You expand the user management module. You have a form called permissions. So in the permissions form, you have, by roles, you can pick up a role and accordingly assign permissions to all the forms for that role. Or by forms, you can pick a form. And for that form, you can assign different role permissions in there. So inside project management, we had the forms that we had created. So if I type Lionel, those are the forms that I had created. The form that I just created is Lionel project team. I pick the form. And here is where you have all the roles create, specific. So I just want all the project management related roles to be having access to this form. So what I would do, associate project manager, project coordinator, project initiator, project manager, senior project manager. This is not the designer, senior project manager. So these are all the different roles that I would like to have access to this particular form. The only thing is you can still go ahead and make specific changes in. For example, if you don't want associate project manager to delete any record, you can clear that as well. And if you don't want anybody to create, they can edit any existing record. But for example, project coordinator, if you don't want, or initiator for that matter, if you don't want them to create or edit, but they can edit the create or delete, but they can only edit the record, you can configure it that way as well. So this is the role permissions for the form. And you also have report permissions so that when you want to enable project initiator. So if you have report for your form, it will be listed here and you can enable the forms roles who can have access to generate reports for that particular form. Right now we don't have, so we have not there is nothing enabled here. So role permissions, I have done that. I will click save to save the permissions. All right. So now we have done two things. First, we have created a form and published it. Second thing is we have assigned permissions to certain roles to access the form in certain ways. Some have access to create, edit, delete, and view. Some have access only to edit and view. So that way we have configured it.